You are now listening to the Current Affair Podcast with your host, Dr. D'Angelo Taylor.
This is the second episode of the Current Affair. My name is Dr. D'Angelo Taylor, and my guest today is Dr. MaCherie Placide. How are you doing, Dr. Placide?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So this is going to be the first episode that we actually put up on YouTube so people can see us.
Okay.
So let the viewers and the listeners know a little bit about yourself.
I'm from Houston, Texas.
All right.
Born and raised. Graduated from Texas Southern University with a bachelor's in biology, medical technology.
Okay.
And I worked in the lab for a couple of years till I started my young life of energy and just blind ambition. Moved to San Francisco for a couple of years, but didn't work in the lab and did an array of other jobs while I was living in San Francisco. And in 1989, in October, the earthquake took place and I needed to go somewhere else and I didn't want to go back home to Houston. Long story short, I ended up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, getting there in the middle of January, which you don't do because you just don't. So, once again, some real blind ambition, probably stupidity, but in any case, settled into Minnesota, was thinking, you know what, I'm going to give this probably about a year or two, and I've been here for 30 years. Worked in the laboratory again, went back to school, got my master's in public administration, and then followed up with getting a doctorate in public administration and started teaching. And been to a 360-degree turn altogether, shall we say, and started teaching in public administration and political science. And with that, ended up at Western Illinois University, where I've been for 12 years.
Okay. So I remember meeting you when you first got there at WIU. That's telling my age a little bit, and I recall there was something that you would put in your syllabus, and this will lead into my next question.
Okay.
I give advice to educators, and you put something in your syllabus that said "unpack the lip," and so. So, for first-time educators, how we're used to, and I say we because I taught one of my first classes here at the university this year.
Right.
So, how do you come out the gate? Because Macomb, where Western is really big on that chewing tobacco. So
well, and I didn't know it, and I came out the gate. You're right. I came out the gate like, look, I'm not about to do this. I had taught at University of Wisconsin, River Falls.
Okay.
Didn't have that problem. They didn't have that problem. And it was around the time right before the invasion of Iraq.
Right.
So students who were in the reserves, who were thinking that they would never be called up, were called up.
Right.
It changed the whole dynamic. Well, by the time I got to Western, and so these young men and women are coming back on after they've done their tour of duty, coming back on campus to get their education, and I'm noticing in the back, it's very quiet, but in the back, and I'm looking and I see this, these cups, and I'm thinking, okay, well, you can drink, but they were spitting in the cup. And what? Huh? And at first, I was having a problem with it because I'm like, that's nasty.
Right.
And I don't want that in my class. And then it just so happens that the H1N1 broke out. Okay,
Right.
virus. So I use that as a tool to say, oh no, you can't come in here. That's smoking too, because to me that's smoking, and we're not
Right.
supposed to have any smoking in the building of any type.
Right.
And I just said, look, you need to unpack the lift, or you need to get the type of snuff or whatever that you can swallow. But you cannot come in here. And I said, it's a health risk because of the H1N1, and there was a change in how things happened
Right.
during that time too, because we had to, the faculty we had to loosen our, requirements for teaching during that time.
Right.
But I was like, you can't come in here like that, and it's been there ever since. It's
So
been there
so
ever since.
so let's stay on that because you talk about H1N1. As you know, we're
Yes.
going through a global pandemic now.
Mm-hmm.
What would be some of your advice? I guess it's a two-part question for folks who are trying to get into the academy, both new folks who are trying to get in, but current members of the academy, and how they approach students during this pandemic.
Well, yeah, that's a real two-for question. The
Mm.
first one, when you talk about getting into the academy, getting into
Right.
teaching and higher education, I go back to the fox and the lion as far as
Okay.
Machiavelli, and that is, be careful of, you have to have the fox. Fox will get you out of holes and knows where all of the landmines are, but the lion will be there to protect you. And you have to know really when to say no
Mm.
to things and be okay with it.
Right.
But if you do go into something, you need to be prepared, or come up with an idea. You need to be prepared to move forward, because they're going to go, oh, well, you came up with that. Well, then you should go with it. Okay, you should do it. So then you need to move forward with it, especially if it's something you feel passionate about.
Right.
And if you feel the passion of wanting to teach young generation of students who have graduated from high school, coming into a new environment of higher education,
Right.
and it's a passion for you, then do it. If it's something there, and my fundamental thought is, if it's something that you could get up and do and wake up in the morning every day and say, I could do it for free, then that's where you should be. But don't get it twisted. You do want to get paid. You got to pay bills.
Right.
There will be times when you feel tired from it. And then something happens, a student will call you or come into your office or send you something, a letter or whatever, and it will renew you. That's when you know that's what you need to do. When you think that, man, I'm tired of this, I don't want to do this anymore, and then all of a sudden a student will come to you, it renews you. And you do that for me all the time.
Right.
When I talk to you, it's like, okay, I know I'm doing the right thing.
Well, you got me through.
Yeah.
And I talk about you with a lot of folks because it was not just during my undergraduate period, because I took some of your undergrad courses as well. But when I got to my graduate program, you were one of the folks that basically sat me down, and you were honest with me about my deficiency at that point in writing. And so you continuously pushed me to become a better writer. And that thing.
Oh, and you are like, wow.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's like a musical instrument.
Right.
If you keep practicing at it, you will do well. I mean, I'm not a good writer.
Right.
I can tell you that right now.
Okay.
But I practice at it and I keep working at it. And I'm glad they have Grammarly now, because that's
Yeah.
If you don't know if you have Grammarly,
yeah,
I
got the premium. I got the premium.
The more you keep writing, the better you will get. And
Right.
and if you speak it, I always say, well, if you're playing a trumpet and you just did something bad, you hear it. But when we write, we don't read it out loud and we don't hear it. But then when
Right.
you read it out loud, then you say, ooh, I don't know how I feel about that. Let me, then you rewrite again. So it's just a process. And we're fearful of that. Many students that I've come across, it's not that they can't, they're fearful. They don't know if they have what it takes. And all of it is like certain steps. So what I used to do, or what I still do, is I will give them a set of questions. And if you can take those questions and write a few paragraphs for each of that, you've written a paper.
Right.
It's just as simple as that. So having that outline and having those levels of those questions that you want asked, and then you answer them, then that is how you can do it. But you think some of the greatest writers in our century just did it off the cuff, just in a whim? No, they had to write. And quite frankly, when you do get into higher education, you should have an editor.
Right.
You should have an editor. That's how they do it. That's the secret I'm revealing. It's just true. No one does it like, oh God, they put out this journal article and this, how did they do that? Well, they had help.
Right.
But people don't want to tell you that. They want to look at it as though they have superpowers, but they don't.
So that's some great advice from a seasoned professor in the game. So, for those seasoned professors, how do they adjust now? Because for the most part, we've never dealt with anything to this magnitude.
We haven't. We've never seen anything. I've never seen anything like this in over my 20 years of teaching. And I'm scared too. I actually shifted my teaching after we were told that we had to go online. And I said, we're going to, all of my classes, we're going to focus on COVID. This is a perfect example of American politics and government. You had federalism. We've seen federalism live. We've seen the presidency live and how it functions, public administration and how it is supposed to operate. And I'm like, I don't have to show you anything. I don't have to, we're not going to use the textbook. I'm going to go by COVID. Right. And all of my classes, I said, I threw out, I don't care about you giving me a synopsis of the Electoral College for your final paper. I want to know, how has COVID-19 impacted your life?
Right.
And some of the stories that I read, there were times I just had to take a break, because it's like, wow, Western, we have our students who come from Chicago.
Right.
And the stories, my mother lost her job. I have to start working to help. My mother got COVID, then my father got COVID. I have to work. I have to go back home to my mother, my father, my 2 sisters, and 3 nephews. How does a student go back to that and is expected to deal with schoolwork that's online? It's difficult, very difficult. And there's depression. There's students who lost jobs and are struggling financially. And then you have the students who are like, well, my dad built me, put weights in the garage, and so that's how I work out. So you can kind of tell the difference in class,
right,
of how they are affected by it. There's some who say, well, it's not really anything for me to worry about. And I'm like, okay, well, that's what you feel. So, okay. But the majority of them they're angry. The students were very angry because all of a sudden their life has been switched, because it's not just about the academics. when you go to college, particularly when you're doing face-to-face courses. It's
Right.
about the social aspect as well. And they blend together and they play a big role. And when they don't have it, it can sink a student. I mean, can you imagine doing math online?
Yeah.
You know, if you're not a math student or math major,
right.
you know, this probably isn't an issue. But for a student from Chicago who may be struggling with
Right.
writing and with math, and that would be difficult. And it's particularly if you have a faculty member who may not be as learned in the field of online teaching.
Right.
So I just as far as my curriculum, I made it simple because I had to take into consideration when I left Western for spring break. You thought I was going to take all my textbooks with me? Well, what would make me think that my students would do the same thing?
Right.
So I had to kind of put the brakes on and say, okay, here are the things that are available to you online that you can go and get. So we went to basic definitions. Here are the definitions that I want you to define. Here are the things that we have talked about and that are posted on on PowerPoints. So go to that and do the work. And they did. They actually did the work. But I did take into consideration there were some students who couldn't do it because they weren't in a position, they weren't somewhere where they could.
Right.
You know? So.
And so you talked about how you weaved COVID-19 into this course. Can you tell the listeners how you decide to use current events, or what current events do you decide to use in your course? Because I know when I was taking your classes back in the day, that we would always talk about, we would weave whatever we're talking about, whether it's Luther Gulick, Max Weber, whoever, we would always weave that back into what was going on in present day.
Oh my goodness. Right now, I just say that what we're doing is the prints, as far as if we were to look at government in general, the prints and all of that's happening there. But the piece of federalism played a large role. And I was able to weave in, I had Tuesday chats with my intro class. And so I would bring up a question, as far as what the governors are doing and the differences in how they are reacting to the positive cases of COVID and what they're doing in order to try to keep people safe. So like if it meant shutting down everything, shutting down restaurants, places where we would congregate and there's no social distancing. So I would kind of weave those pieces into the conversation. I had a African American studies on race and ethnicity and politics, and so they just went with it because most things they was what was happening with the number of African Americans who were actually positive and who were dying from COVID-19, from the hotspots in New York and in Chicago, Florida. So they actually picked the ball up and started running with it. Because you have frontline, you have the frontline people, the people who actually serve the food. Well, who are they? They're Latino and Black. So they're the ones who would be at the forefront of probably being exposed to some form of COVID-19, or they might be in the medical profession. They're on the front lines. Now we're starting to see it in the meatpacking industry. Who's hired in those areas? You have people of color who are in those areas, and that's where you would find where the higher number and percentage of people who probably have been exposed to it and can't really do anything about it because they have to work.
Exactly.
They really and that to me is I think the painful part for me is that there are people who have lost everything because they've lost their job, and they have children to feed.
Right.
And how do you feed them? I mean, what do you do? And you have an invisible, I don't want to say alien, might be too strong a word, but we have this invisible virus that we cannot see. We don't know where it's coming from. We still don't have really a solid understanding of what it can do, and it's probably mutated, maybe.
Yeah, I was reading that the other day. They said that it's starting to mutate to a point where it's becoming more contagious. So, but I'll let you continue. Yeah.
No problem. And so we don't have a vaccine for it. You don't know where it's coming from. So then it does change the way we respond as humans, and from other people, from to society, and how we are trying to survive in this world. I just remember I had made a joke to a couple of friends of mine when it was coming, and this was right. This is, I always say, there's the pre-COVID, and then there's the not post-COVID, but we're in the present right now of it.
Right.
But right before it hit, and I just out of the blue, I just said, "Oh wow, is this really gonna happen?" And I said, "Well, let me go to the store and get some toilet paper." I was just kidding. I swear to you, I was just kidding. And I said, "Well, let me go to that. I need to go get some toilet paper." And we were just laughing about it, So, oh, well, don't forget you gotta go to the liquor store. And I said, "Oh yeah, that's real important, whatever." And so. And I actually, I hadn't gone to the liquor store, but I just happened to go to the store, and I'm looking and I'm going, people were actually getting toilet paper.
Right.
And I was like, for real? I said, well, let me back it up too. But I really, I didn't mean that. I was just saying it as a joke. And I'm like, oh. And then I think a week or two later, I went back to the store. And I went to Trader Joe's, as a matter of fact.
All right.
And the entire, where the processed food, frozen foods are and everything, that entire aisle, there was no food.
Wow.
Nothing. I went to Aldi's, and meat, hardly anything there. And I stood there and I said, this shit is real. This shit is real. This is something I have not in my lifetime experienced, and I don't know what my students are going through either.
Right.
So I always find that it's important to really have current events in the mix when it comes to teaching. Because, it's boring. It's boring. It is. Did I tell you the story about when first time when I did on 9/11?
No, I didn't. No, you didn't tell me that one.
So, and this really changed the dynamic, the way in which I was to teach. 9/11. I had my routine. I'd listen to NPR while I'm on my way. I had an 8 o'clock class. I know it's hard to believe, but yes, I had an 8 o'clock class.
Wow.
Listen to NPR that morning. It must have been about maybe 7:45. Got out of the car, prepared for my class, went to my class, and we were moving into federalism, and I had written notes. That was the boringest lecture I'd ever given in my life. Students were falling asleep. And this is how, when you really time yourself, because I had a beeper and my beeper was going off. And it was my mother, and I didn't, realize, and I said, well, I'm not, I'll call her back later or whatever. I didn't have a phone back. And I even had the students to stand up and stretch. In that minute, in that time, from 8 o'clock to 9:15, we did not know what had happened. We didn't know. So after class is over with, and I'm thinking, man, that was bad. That really was bad. So I walk across the hall to the cohort of mine, because I was still in school getting my doctorate. And he was head of admissions. And I walked in and I looked at his secretary, and I said, well, what's going on? I thought something had happened to him. And she said, we're under attack. I said, what are you talking about? Told me what happened. And I was like, what did you just say?
Right.
And so I immediately went back to my office. I went into the faculty lounge, and within maybe 10 minutes after I was there, the last tower collapsed. And I knew then, I was like, oh, I'm not doing, I mean, it's like, this is generational changing for these students. And I just told myself, I'm not gonna do what I did again, and chose to say, I need to have more current events. I need to see or hear what are they feeling? Okay,
Right.
where are you in this whole case when it comes to politics? And ever since then, I'm like, no, I'm going to go at this in a different way. And
Right.
so I've always put in some form of current events, because how else are you going to learn? And the generations are changing as well. When I always say this, when I was growing up, we had maybe 6 channels, black and white. Now, and we didn't have a choice. I mean, you saw the channels, you saw whatever program was on there, and you dealt with it. Today, y'all don't even look at television. You know what I mean?
Right.
Well, let me say that the generation, they don't really look at television. There are other avenues and mediums for them to be able to get what they want.
Right.
And it's hundreds of channels. And it's not a choice. It is a choice. And
Right.
politics is not one of them. Watching
not.
the news is not one of them.
Right.
So I have to, so now when I get these looks in class, like, I'm just here because it's a gen ed class and I don't really want to be here kind of attitude. So then I've decided to say, okay, so tell me what's important to you.
Right.
And they will say, I heard Kim Kardashian's name. I said, really? So what do you look at? Not a lot of Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat.
Right. Snapchat's the thing.
I used to call it Snapchat. It's Snapchat. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And I still haven't figured. I have it. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm not using that. I had a mishap back in the day. I'm not.
Okay. But I've seen where it's expanded itself now. Okay.
Right.
But or Instagram, the YouTube are places where I always call it YouTubing.
Right.
Or whatever. But so I'm like, well, I need to find what's the source for them, and how can I bring them back and say, well, here's some things you need to look at. Okay.
Right.
You need to look at, like if we're going to look at the news, why would I want to watch the news? Well, might be something there of interest to you. If you just take maybe 5 minutes out of your time and just have it on your smartphone and just let it look at it, that's more important. That's something that's really important, instead of not at all. So that's sort of the way that I kind of bring current events in, things that are really important to them.
Right.
If I'm like, well, if you don't like the food on campus and the cost is too high, what are you going to do about it? Wow. You have tools to be able to speak out and say, I don't like this and there needs to be a change. So putting it in that respect of,
right.
Okay, let's start here. Like, what immediately impacts you? And that's the thing. If it doesn't affect them, they don't care. you know. So
So,
but I think right now things are starting to change because this stuff is starting to affect.
I like that point when you talk about if it affects folks. So I received a few text messages. That's a good
Mm-hmm.
amount about what's going on down in Georgia now
Mm-hmm.
with the young man. And so, ironically, some of my students who received that text were also, profiled at a Kroger. So, how do you work with these type of current events, but also creating, I guess, a path or pathway for students to kind of get just not only the theoretical knowledge and how you would apply it to the situation, but also the practical knowledge, or being able to take a situation like what's happening down in Georgia with the young man who was shot and killed, or the young man who was shot and killed in Indianapolis, and being able to contextualize that so that they leave with a better understanding of how to effect change, like you talked about.
When we look at civil liberties and civil rights,
Right.
and talking about the legal equality, the equality of condition and equality of aid, condition of aid that we have in this country, and then asking, do we really have legal equality? And I'll ask that. Do we really have legal equality? No, we don't. Why do we not have it? Okay. And then those are the types of things that come up. Or if they don't, then I'll go, well, what about, let's look at gun control.
Right.
Let's look at AR-15s. Can you actually walk down the street with an AR-15? And it's quiet because, particularly with a mixed group, they're like, okay, who's going to say what?
Right.
They're looking at each other. But I'm going to ask the question, can you walk down with an AR-15 or a gun? Ohio is open carry. Tamar Rice had a play gun and was shot and killed without question,
right,
without hesitation, and was just playing. So I bring those questions up when we're looking at it and saying, now, how can we deal with issues of racial profiling? And even go into the definition, profiling, that's law enforcement. When looking at it and investigating, they're supposed to profile. Okay? I'm not saying that there's nothing wrong, that it's right or wrong, but how it's used.
Right.
If we're investigating and it's the FBI who is looking for a serial killer, they're going to put some form of a profile together based on the evidence that they have. Okay? That's a profile. But if off the cuff you have a newly graduated man or woman from law enforcement who has some suspicions of themselves within their character, then that type of profiling is really incompetent and cause for a questioning, really, the police department or the law enforcement department that they come from and how they are trained. So I go into, we have equality of, condition of opportunity. We can all succeed and fail and start over again and do it as many times as necessary, but that's not really, not for everybody.
Right.
And then we argue about condition of aid, that here in this country that we are given the right to have or to be bestowed upon us a level of comfort that the government will help us even when we're down and out. And that is also debated, and that's not equal either. So those are the types of things where I'll bring in current events and look at definitely for racial profiling. I'll bring it up, but I have to admit, not this last semester, it's starting to emotionally get to me. and I had to back off sometimes, because I don't want to jump on students and, make them think that they're the problem, but they're not. It's just the situation in general when seeing these types of things happening, it gets to me, you know. Uh, to see Ahmaud Arbery being killed. Like I said, I can't look at it. It's painful for me.
Right. And so, as always, we're coming to the end of the podcast. A couple of things I'm going to do right now. I want you to let folks know how can they find you on social media, if you want them to find you, and then and then I'll give a little story after this. But how can folks find you on social media?
Social media, Facebook, MaCherie Placide. If you put my name in, I should come up. Let me see. Instagram. I have all these. Okay. Instagram, I am. My handle is Red Goose Loose 417. Red Goose Loose, LOOSE 417. And on Twitter, I am J Snoopy D. That's JSNOOPYD. And you'll see because there'll be a dog in the picture. So that's how I can get in touch with me. I have my I think I have Snapchat. Yeah, I do have Snapchat. I don't know where I am on Snapchat. I'm still trying to figure it out, but I'm there as well. But my email is placidemp@yahoo.com. So if anyone wants to email me or get in touch with me, great. This is good. I wrote a book.
Right.
So
okay. Oh, well,
get that out of there.
Oh yeah. Please publicize that you wrote a book.
wrote a book about Obama. I don't have a copy of it with me, but I did and wrote it with a co-authored with another colleague of mine, right. And I really loved it because that's almost a dream come true to me. It is. It's a dream come true, and I had to do it. So, right. And I actually enjoyed writing that.
And so I'll leave you all with a quick anecdote about Dr. Placide. And so, as I mentioned before, to some of you who may be watching this or who may be listening, Dr. Placide was the chairwoman of my master's thesis. But I think what's really good about Doci is that she is very modest. There are not many full professors in political science departments with doctorates in public administration, and she happens to be one of few across the country. So, we're talking and speaking with royalty now. We're speaking with someone who has done this, who has a breadth of life experiences, but was not only able to connect with students from, urban inner city backgrounds, but she's able to connect with folks from rural backgrounds, even if she's telling them to, unpack the lip. All right. So that has been this episode of The Current Affair. But before I leave, I want you all to know, so what I'm going to start doing is highlight, some of my students and some of my friends and their businesses in my show. I figure if I'm able to get a good following, that I can highlight them. So this is AMW Fitness. I don't know if you all can kind of see it. And this is from one of my students. And so he has his own fitness clothing line. And I bought this to support. His name is Aaron Williams. So if you're looking for, a decent shirt that you can work out in and something that, doesn't cost too much, AMW Fitness is the way to go. I'll be doing this every week for every episode, but I wanted to make sure that I got that out there while I had the opportunity. Again, this episode will air live on Saturday. So please look out for it on SoundCloud. Look out for it on iTunes. It will be live. Apple Podcasts will be live. So take your time. Enjoy the rest of your week. And so when you hear this, it'll be on Saturday. And so enjoy the rest of your weekend. And always remember to stay current. Thanks, y'all.
Now that's the stuff leaders should be made of.
You have just listened to the Current Affair Podcast with Dr. D'Angelo Taylor. Episodes will be posted every Saturday at soundcloud.com/The Current Affair. Also on Apple Podcasts. Until next time, stay current.